There are 4 levels of consciousness, and the level you are at right now is determining exactly what the law of assumption delivers to you. Not your effort, not your technique, not your sincerity, your level. Most people who study Neville Goddard are stuck at level 1. They do not know they are at level 1. They believe they are practicing correctly. They believe they are applying the teachings with genuine commitment, and they are. But genuine commitment to a practice does not change the level of consciousness the practice is being applied from. And the law does not respond to commitment. It responds to level. It reads the ground state of the nervous system with mechanical accuracy and reflects it back into the physical world with mechanical fidelity. At level 1, it reflects level 1. And level 1 is the level where the universe appears to be ignoring every single thing you ask for. The spiritual industry will not tell you this. It cannot afford to. The entire commercial structure of the manifestation space depends on the promise that the law is equally accessible to everyone at all times, and that the only variable is how well you are applying the technique. That premise is what sells courses and programs and coaching. But it is not accurate, and the people who have studied Neville for years and continue to see limited results are not failing because their technique is wrong. They are stuck at the level where the law produces exactly what level 1 produces. More wanting, more almost. More of the gap between current reality and desired reality, and no technique applied from level 1 will change that, because the technique is not what the law is reading. The level is what the law is reading, and until the level changes, the output does not change. Think about the way financial institutions work. You have probably seen the documentation of how banks treat clients at different levels of wealth. At one level, a bank will charge you fees, deny you loans, and offer you the minimum in service and attention. At a different level, the same institution will assign you a dedicated advisor, waive fees, and proactively bring you opportunities you never requested. The bank is the same institution operating under the same rules, but the rules produce radically different outcomes depending on where you sit in the system. The law of assumption operates with the same structural logic. It is the same law for every person. But depending on the level of consciousness from which you are engaging it, the outputs are so different that they appear to be different laws entirely. The person at level 1 appears to live in a universe that ignores their requests. The person at level 3 appears to live in a universe that bends toward them without effort. Same law, different levels, different treatment. Neville Goddard described these levels in his own language, though he did not explicitly number them or present them as a hierarchical framework. He described the person who is still trusting the senses, still looking to the outer world for confirmation, still treating the 3D as the primary source of information about what is real. That is a specific level of consciousness, and it corresponds to a specific and predictable relationship with the law. He also described the person who has genuinely crossed the threshold, who has made the assumption so deeply that the inner state has become more real than the outer evidence, who inhabits the end rather than visiting it. That is a different level of consciousness, and the law's response to it is correspondingly different. Not because the universe is rewarding the second person or punishing the first, but because the law is a mirror, and a mirror reflects what it is shown. Level 1 consciousness is shown wanting, it reflects wanting. Level 3 consciousness is shown having, it reflects having. The first level is the level most people occupy when they begin studying manifestation. It is the level of the motivated wisher. The person who has discovered that consciousness might have something to do with reality and is genuinely inspired by that discovery. At this level, the primary emotional relationship with the desired state is desire. The money is wanted. The wanting is real. The wanting is felt intensely during visualization and practice, and the law, reading that wanting accurately and responding to it precisely, produces the state of wanting. More of the gap, more of the experience of money being something that is not yet present, but that is deeply, urgently desired. The practices at this level tend to produce what practitioners describe as almost results. The money seems to move toward them and then stop short. Opportunities arise and then fall apart. Progress appears and then reverses, because the wanting is the strongest signal, and the law is delivering exactly the wanting experience. Not intentionally blocking the money, accurately reflecting the consciousness. The second level is the level of the earnest practitioner, the person who has moved past wishing and is actively working with Neville's techniques. SATS is being practiced. Revision is being applied. Affirmations are being used with genuine effort. At this level, the person is generating two competing signals. During the practices, they access something that genuinely approaches the having state. The imaginal scenes feel real. The feeling of the wish fulfilled is touched, sometimes deeply. But outside the practices, the monitoring consciousness reasserts itself. The checking, the comparing of current conditions to desired conditions, the measuring of the gap. So the subconscious receives a mixed input, sometimes having, often wanting. And the law, responding to the dominant signal, produces a mixed experience. Sporadic results. Things that work sometimes and inexplicably do not work at other times. Progress that is real but inconsistent, frustrating, impossible to replicate predictably, because the signal is inconsistent. The law is producing exactly what the dominant consciousness broadcasts, and when the dominant consciousness is mixed, the experience is mixed. The third level is the level of genuine assumption. The person at this level has built the inner state to the point where it has become the primary reference point for reality. The outer evidence has not necessarily changed. The bank account may look the same, but the inner relationship to it has changed fundamentally. The nervous system is no longer treating the bank account as the measure of financial reality. It is treating the inner state as the measure, and the inner state is consistently, habitually, background noise level anchored in having rather than wanting. The monitoring impulse has dropped. The verbalization of goals has naturally ceased. The practices are no longer effortful because the ground state is no longer in active conflict with the assumption. And the law, reading this level of consciousness, with the same accuracy it reads every other level, responds differently, not occasionally, not sporadically, consistently, predictably. The things that the person at level 3 manifests do not feel miraculous to them. They feel normal, expected, the natural expression of a consciousness that has accepted the desired state as real. The fourth level, which Neville described in various ways but most consistently as the consciousness of the fully realized imagination, is the level at which the law operates not just predictably, but automatically. At this level, the assumption is not something the person builds deliberately. It is simply how their consciousness works. They do not practice assumption, they live assumption. They do not need to correct their inner state because their inner state is not running the lack program at any level. Their subconscious has been so completely reorganized around the having state through whatever process of lived experience or deliberate inner work brought them there, that the law functions in their life the way breathing functions in their body, without effort, without awareness, without the need for any technique or practice to maintain it. These are the people who appear to be supernaturally fortunate to everyone who observes them from the outside, who seem to attract money and opportunity with a consistency that looks impossible from the perspective of someone at level 1 or 2. And the reason is not luck. It is not advantage. It is the level of consciousness. It is the signal the law is reading. And the law is doing exactly what the law does at every level, reflecting it. Before we continue, check the pinned comment below this video. What is there connects directly to the second half of this and will give you a specific and concrete way to identify where you currently are in this framework. Most people who encounter this framework will immediately want to know which level they are at. And the answer is available to them without any external assessment. The level of consciousness you are currently operating from is readable directly from your habitual experience of the financial domain, not from what you think during deliberate practice, from what your nervous system does automatically when money is the context of the moment. Does an unexpected expense produce immediate anxiety? That is level 1 or low level 2. Does the thought of your current financial situation produce a background tightness even when nothing specific has triggered it? That is level 1 or 2. Do you find yourself monitoring regularly, checking accounts, calculating gaps, running mental projections of when and how the desired state might arrive? That is level 2. Does the topic of money produce something that feels like neutrality rather than tightness? Not forced neutrality, but genuine, quiet, undefended neutrality. That is approaching level 3. Does financial abundance feel not like something you are working toward, but like something you simply are, the way you simply are a person, with a specific name and a specific history, without needing to remind yourself or maintain the feeling? That is level 3 or 4. The transition between these levels is not linear. It is not a gradual accumulation of practice hours that smoothly moves you from one level to the next. It is threshold-based. It is more like the transition from ice to water than the transition from cold water to warm water. You are in one state up to a specific threshold, and then something shifts, and you are in a fundamentally different state. Neville described this threshold in multiple ways. He called it the crossing of the threshold. He called it the new birth. He called it the moment when the inner conviction becomes stronger than the outer evidence. And the way you know you have crossed it is not that the money arrives, though it does. It is that the inner relationship to money changes in a way that feels irreversible. The old anxiety does not return. The monitoring impulse does not reassert itself. The ground state has shifted, and it stays shifted. Because once the subconscious has genuinely accepted a new ground state, it defends that state with the same tenacity with which it previously defended the old one. The reason most people are stuck at level 1 or level 2 is not that they lack the capacity to reach level 3. It is that the path from 2 to 3 requires doing something that the level 2 consciousness is strongly resistant to. It requires withdrawing investment from the outer evidence as the primary reality. It requires, at a genuine and neurological level, rather than a philosophical or aspirational one, treating the inner state as more real than the bank account. And for a consciousness that has been trained from birth to treat the physical world as the primary reality, this is a significant reorientation. It does not happen through intellectual agreement. It does not happen through deciding to believe it. It happens through sustained, consistent, emotionally genuine practice of inhabiting the inner state as if it were already the primary reality. Through sats, through revision, through living in the end with enough repetition and enough feeling that the subconscious eventually accepts the new hierarchy. Inner first, outer second. Having, not wanting. Understanding which level you are at is not an exercise in self-criticism. It is a diagnostic. It is the same kind of information a doctor uses when assessing a physical condition. Knowing where you are is the only way to understand what the relevant intervention is. The person at level 1 who is applying the tools designed for level 3 will be confused and frustrated by their results, not because the tools are wrong, but because the diagnostic has not been done. They are applying a treatment to a condition that has not been identified, and the gap between the treatment and the actual condition is what produces the experience of working hard at manifestation and seeing nothing, or seeing results so random and infrequent that they might plausibly be coincidence. The diagnostic is available to you right now, without any external input, by simply observing the quality of your nervous system's automatic response in the financial domain, not your intended response. Not the response you produce during a deliberate practice, the automatic response, the one that fires before you can direct it. That automatic response is the neurological signature of your current level, and it is also the specific thing that the inner work is designed to change. Not your beliefs about money at the level of conscious philosophy, the automatic response of the nervous system. The thing that fires when an expense arrives unexpectedly, when a financial conversation arises without warning, when you lie in bed at night and your attention drifts to money without being directed there. What does your nervous system do in that moment? That is your level. And your level is what the law is responding to. The path from level 2 to level 3, the crossing of the threshold that Neville described, does not require more techniques. It does not require harder work. It requires a different quality of work. It requires working at the specific layer where the automatic response lives, not the conscious intention layer, the subconscious encoding layer, the layer that responds to consistent repetition combined with genuine emotional experience, applied at the moments of lowest resistance. SATS is designed precisely for this. Revision is designed precisely for this. Living in the end, genuinely rather than performatively, is the daily practice of continuously feeding the subconscious, the signal that the ground state is having rather than wanting, not during the practice, all day, as the background, as the lens, as the unconscious assumption that shapes everything else. And when that signal has been fed consistently enough, the threshold is crossed, the automatic response changes, level 3 begins, and the law, responding to the new level, produces a different kind of life. The law is not failing you, it is reading you, precisely, accurately, at the level you are actually at, not the level you aspire to be at. And the first step toward the level that produces the results you want is the honest, unflinching recognition of the level you are currently at. Not with shame, not with the additional burden of self-judgment layered on top of the existing burden of financial lack, with the clean diagnostic clarity of someone who has just located the actual variable. You are here. The work goes in this direction. And everything Neville left behind is a precise set of instruments for doing exactly that work. What does it actually look like to move between levels? This is the question that most frameworks answer vaguely, with language about raising your vibration or deepening your practice or expanding your consciousness. Neville was more specific than that. He was specific enough that you can locate the actual mechanism and work on it directly. The movement from one level to the next happens when the subconscious accepts a new ground state as real. That is all. No ceremony, no spiritual achievement, no particular accumulation of merit. The subconscious accepts the new ground state, the automatic response changes and the level changes, and the subconscious accepts a new ground state through the same mechanism it accepted the old one. Repetition, emotional intensity, consistency. The question is simply whether you are feeding it the new state or the old one with the greater force and the greater regularity. At level 1, the dominant feed is wanting. The wanting is emotionally intense, consistent, and continuously reinforced by the physical circumstances that confirm the wanting. The subconscious receives it clearly. It accepts it as the ground state, and it produces more of it. Moving from level 1 to level 2 requires beginning to interrupt this feed, not by suppressing the wanting, but by introducing a competing signal. The Satias practice, even when it feels artificial and unconvincing, is still introducing a competing signal. The revision practice, even when the memories feel stubbornly real, is still weakening the emotional architecture of the old signal. The imaginal work, even when it does not feel as real as the physical, is still competing for the position of ground state. And competition is the beginning of change. The new signal does not need to win immediately. It needs to compete, and compete consistently. Because the subconscious does not respond to the most powerful single impression, it responds to the most consistent pattern over time. At level 2, the competition has been established. 2 signals are running simultaneously, and the experience of level 2 is characterized by that competition. The sporadic results, the near misses, the sense that the law is working but unpredictably. That unpredictability is not a mystery. It is the direct expression of a subconscious receiving 2 competing signals and producing outputs that reflect the mixed input. When the having signal is temporarily dominant, the physical world moves toward the desired state. When the wanting signal reasserts dominance, the physical world moves away from it. The practitioner at level 2 experiences this as the law working inconsistently. But the law is working perfectly consistently. It is expressing exactly the dominant signal at each moment. The inconsistency is in the signal, not in the law. Moving from level 2 to level 3 requires the having signal to become the dominant background state, rather than the dominant state during practices. This is the shift that most people spend years attempting and many never complete. Not because it is impossible, but because they are applying the signal in the wrong place. They are intensifying the practice, doing longer SAT sessions, more vivid imaginal scenes, more emotionally charged revision work. And those are not wrong, but they are not what makes the critical difference. The critical difference is what runs in the background between the practices, the quality of the automatic assumptions about money that operate at the level of the nervous system throughout the day. When those background assumptions shift from wanting to having, the competition ends and the having signal becomes dominant. The subconscious accepts the new ground state. The threshold is crossed. Level 3 begins. The specific work that shifts the background assumptions is different from the specific work that creates powerful practices. It is subtler. It is the moment-by-moment, day-by-day automatic response by automatic response work of inhabiting the having state in ordinary contexts. Not during dedicated sessions, during the rest of the day, when money is mentioned in a conversation that you are not directing, when you see the price of something you want and feel the automatic response in your body, when you wake up in the morning and your mind drifts toward money before you have consciously directed it there. These are the moments that determine your level, not the SAT session last night. These moments. And the work at these moments is not to force a different response. It is to have genuinely built an inner state that produces a different response automatically, not performance. Architecture. Neville Goddard described people who had crossed this threshold in ways that are worth examining carefully. They were not people who had achieved extraordinary discipline over their thoughts. They were people whose relationship to the desired reality had become so internally solid that the external evidence simply did not carry the old authority anymore. They were not ignoring the physical world, they were reading it differently. From a different vantage point, from inside the desired state rather than outside it, and from inside the physical evidence that would once have generated anxiety or monitoring or wanting simply registered as temporary and already in the process of resolving. Not through their intervention, through the law doing what the law does when the signal it is reading is genuine assumption at the level of ground state. The people you encounter, who seem to manifest money with an ease that appears unfair or impossible, are not more deserving than you. They are not more spiritual. They are not luckier in any meaningful sense. They are at a different level of consciousness. Their automatic response in the financial domain is settled rather than searching, having rather than wanting, complete rather than in progress. And the law, which responds to levels with perfect accuracy, is responding to that level with the output that level produces. Consistent, predictable, effortless feeling abundance. Not because the universe is playing favorites, because the mirror reflects what it is shown. And what they are showing it consistently, automatically, without deliberate effort, is the having state. This is available to you at the level of mechanism. It is not a gift reserved for a specific type of person. It is the output of a specific type of inner architecture. And inner architecture can be built. It is built through exactly the process Neville described, through working with the subconscious at the moments of its greatest accessibility, through revising the historical data that holds the old architecture in place, through inhabiting the end state, not as a technique but as the actual ground of consciousness, through doing this consistently enough and genuinely enough that the threshold is reached and the automatic response changes. And when the automatic response changes, the level changes. And when the level changes, the treatment from the law changes. Because the law does not give you what you ask for. It gives you what you are. And what you are at the deepest neurological level is always and only your current level of consciousness. Change the level and you change the life, not eventually, because the physical is always the echo of the inner, always, without exception, at every level. If this framework shifted something in how you understand why your results have been what they have been, leave a comment and tell me which level you recognized yourself in. The more honest and specific the comment, the more useful it is to the people watching this, who are also trying to locate themselves accurately in this framework. Accurate self-location is the beginning of the work that actually moves you. And if you know someone who has been practicing Neville's work with genuine effort and genuine frustration, someone who cannot understand why the law seems to work for some people and not for them, share this with them, not as an explanation of why they are stuck, as the beginning of an explanation of what to do about it. There is a specific pattern in how people at each level describe their experience of working with Neville's teachings, and that pattern is worth examining because it contains a significant amount of diagnostic information. The person at level 1 describes the law as something they are trying to access. There is a sense of distance from it. The law feels like something that exists and works for other people, but has not yet decided to work for them. They attribute this to something they are not yet doing correctly, some technique they have not mastered, some belief they have not yet cleared. The language is consistently one of seeking access to something that is not yet available. The person at level 2 describes the law as something that is working intermittently. They have had results. They can point to specific things that manifested and feel certain the law produced them, but they cannot replicate the results consistently. The law feels like something they can touch and then lose, like a signal that comes in clearly sometimes and is full of static at others. They attribute the inconsistency to their own state, which is accurate, but they tend to frame the work as trying to get back to the clear signal rather than understanding that the clear signal needs to become the ground state rather than the occasional peak state. The person at level 3 describes the law as something they stopped thinking about, not because they lost interest in it, because it became obvious, the same way gravity is obvious. You do not think about gravity. You do not work on your relationship with gravity. You simply operate in a world where it functions consistently and reliably, and you have accepted that as the background condition. The person at level 3 has reached the point where the law's reliable operation is similarly obvious. They do not notice it working because it has stopped feeling like something that works occasionally and started feeling like something that simply is. The language changes entirely. Not about accessing the law, not about getting the signal right, about what is happening now, what is already in motion, what is already here. This language shift is not cosmetic, it is diagnostic. The words you use to describe your relationship with the law of assumption are a direct readout of which level you are currently occupying. Not the words you use during deliberate practice when you can consciously direct your language toward the having state. The words you use when you are describing your manifestation experience to someone else in an ordinary conversation, when you are not trying to frame it correctly. When you are just saying what it actually feels like. Those words tell you your level, and your level tells you exactly what the law is currently reflecting back to you. The transition to level 3 is sometimes described by people who have made it as a loss of urgency around money rather than an increase in power over it. This is counterintuitive to most people who are working toward financial manifestation, because the implicit goal has always been to gain more power, more control, more ability to direct the law. But what actually happens at level 3 is the opposite. The person does not gain power over the law, they stop needing power over it. The urgency dissolves, the striving dissolves, the monitoring dissolves. And in the space that those things occupied, a different quality emerges. Not power, ease, not control, trust, but not the trust of hoping something will work out. The trust of someone who has already seen it work so many times from such a genuine and deep inner state that the question of whether it will work has simply stopped being a live question. It has been answered at a level deeper than intellectual conviction. It has been answered by the nervous system itself, which has been reorganized around the having state and no longer generates the signals that would indicate the question is still open. This is what Neville meant by the prayer of thanksgiving rather than the prayer of petition. The prayer of petition is level 1 and 2. It is the consciousness that is still asking, still requesting, still hoping the law will respond. The prayer of thanksgiving is level 3 and 4. It is the consciousness that is already in the state of having received. That is not performing gratitude as a technique. That is actually genuinely at the level of automatic nervous system response, operating from the state of already having rather than still hoping. And from that state, the law does not need to be petitioned. It simply operates, because it is always operating. It is always reflecting. And what it is reflecting at level 3 is the having state. So what it produces is the having experience. You can move between these levels. The architecture that holds you at level 1 or 2 was not installed by any permanent force. It was installed through repetition and emotional intensity and consistency, exactly the same mechanism that can be used to install a different architecture. The difference is that the old architecture had the advantage of being installed involuntarily, through the natural repetition of life circumstances over many years. The new architecture has to be installed deliberately, with intention, with the specific tools Neville provided, and with the understanding that the target is not better practices or stronger feelings during sessions. The target is the background state, the automatic response, the ground from which everything else operates. Change that ground and the level changes. Change the level and the law responds differently, not because the law changed, because the mirror is now being shown something different, and the mirror always, without exception, shows exactly what it is given. That is both the challenge and the entire hope of this work. The law is not broken. It is not withholding. It is not playing favorites. It is reading your level with perfect accuracy and reflecting it with perfect fidelity. Give it level 3 and it gives you level 3 back. That is the complete mechanism. Everything else is detail.